lives with the little beats, and they don't have a good microphone, I don't think. So I know I could pull out the old AirPods, but here we go. We'll put the
Classic.
dorky the Princess Leia. I know. But anyways, good morning, everybody. We are live. Every week it's a triumph. That's my win of the week when I actually can make this go live. But how you doing, Brian?
I'm doing fantastic. You
Oh,
know,
good.
it's just one of those days. Got a good early morning bike ride in, which I don't always get. I used to always bike in the morning in New York City. Like it was,
Right.
you'd wake up and bike. Like that was really your only option. But in
Yeah, because if
Vermont,
you
it's a
don't, you
very
get
much,
killed, right?
yes, 100%. Like the park belongs to
The
Central
runners.
Park belongs to cyclists from basically 5:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Central Park belongs, and then it belongs to the tourists from 7:30 to like 5, and then from 5 on to like 9, it belongs to the runners. Like
Yeah.
that's the unwritten rule of Central Park,
Right.
right? Like if you're trying to bike in the afternoon or in the evening, you can't get mad at the runners. It's their time.
That's
And in the
funny.
morning, the runners can't get mad at the cyclists because it's our time, right?
Yeah.
Like you're welcome to come, but like it's just it's the unwritten rule. You really got to know it.
That's very funny. I have a client who lives basically across the street from Central Park, and I've been trying to get her to do her quality workouts, right? Her intervals outside, and understand, it's not hilly, but it's undulating, right?
Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, and she's one of those people that kind of goes out later in the day. It's like, and she's like, oh yeah, it's too busy, too many runners. And I'm like, go earlier. I was thinking about this morning, actually. I was going to ask you, are you a morning workout person, a midday, evening? When do you work out?
Um, I perform best
Yeah.
probably midday. That's probably
Yeah.
my best. Like when I can get the best quality workout is certainly midday, like afternoon, or I'd say it's somewhere between like 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock, like that kind of
Hmm.
window. Mornings, I can definitely perform well in the mornings. It's just hard. Like waking up is just like a hard thing.
Yeah.
Like I just want to stay in
Or I
bed.
end up with these 8 a.m. meetings every day. I'm like, how did I agree to that? Remember when we started and we
Yeah,
had 7 a.m. meetings? I was like, sure, I could do that. But in the winter, because the light.
it's so dark. Yeah, it's
Right.
rough.
I prefer not to use an alarm. I was thinking about that because I'm working with this personal trainer, and she's like, oh yeah, I have a 6 a.m. appointment on Monday available. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. No. But I
There's a reason
do,
it's open.
yeah, and I do find it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about how do I know if someone maybe that I'm coaching is kind of overtraining, or they're not performing the way that they would like to. And, there's all these unwritten cues as well. I mean, I can look at numbers and it can tell me, okay, we're not achieving what we need to achieve here. But I can also listen to their language, and I can, when somebody starts procrastinating their workouts, and I find this for myself. When I write a note to my coach that says I had to force myself to do this workout today, I know that I need a break. I need to do something different. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
or
was
just
thinking about that.
the tone of their language that they use to
Hmm.
write, or a lot of times for me, it's simply the amount that they write.
Right,
Somebody who's usually writing 2 or 3 sentences now is just putting 2 or 3 words in
right, or nothing.
consistently. Yeah, I'm like,
That's
"Oh,
my
this
passive
person,
aggressive way of saying I'm over this. So,
they're done." Yeah,
yeah,
for
I was
sure.
thinking about
But I
that
do
this
think
morning as
timing,
well.
like, that's a great question. Like, timing is
Hmm.
really important. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the choice.
Right,
You have to kinda train at this time or that time, and we just gotta deal with it, right? You gotta get it in when you get it in, but if you can choose the time, I try to, like, on my structured days, I do try to choose that time based on when I do think I'll perform best, based on
right.
nutrition and just for me, it's a want. Like, when I wake up in the
Hmm.
morning, I don't wanna work out, but then by midday, I'm jealous of everyone who's already posted on Strava that
Right.
they rode. So then I'm like, "Oh, man, I really wanna ride." Like, I feel like I
Yeah.
want to do it, and then by the evening time, I'm kinda like, "Yeah, I'm just tired. I don't wanna do it anymore." So, like, it's that window of
And it affects
opportunity.
your sleep. I find I used to teach spin at night, and I don't know how I did it, because when I work out at night, it takes me too long to downregulate and then be able to sleep again. It's like you got to get the food in, and that affects your sleep. And yeah, it's hard. I find for running, I like to get up first thing on the
Oh, no
bike.
way.
See, and I do. but I like having my coffee and playing with my cat too, so that's a challenge. For
Running
cycling
running
later
first
in the
thing,
day.
oh, so hard.
Yeah. But well, because I was living in San Jose where it's like 120 degrees in the summer, and, now that I live at the coast and it's like perfect running weather all day long. Well, except this week. We've got 100-degree warnings here at the coast, which is unheard of. It's usually like 65 and perfect. So, anyways, yeah, I was just thinking about that this morning. I was like different things at different times of day. And I found now that I'm doing a lot of remote work, I just kind of fit it in when I can between clients. And I've been
Mhm.
trying to build a schedule that works for that. Get out, I want to spend more time outside this winter than on the trainer. So, trying to build my schedule to do that. So, yeah.
I'm the opposite right now. Is like I'm trying to get as much time outside as possible because winter
Right.
is coming, right? So
Right.
it's like I was thinking about this the other day. It's almost like a bag of chips or like M&Ms or something like that. Where in the spring it's so
Yeah.
easy. Like it's like you have a whole bag of M&Ms. You'll give out M&Ms to everybody. You're like
Hmm.
who cares? But when that bag starts to get empty and you only have like 10 M&Ms left,
Yeah.
you're not handing them out to people. And that's how I feel like in fall. I'm like, how many days do I really have left to get outside on the bike
Oh,
in
I feel
Vermont?
you. I
Right. I'm like,
totally
what do I
feel
got?
you on this.
I'm like, maybe I have like 8 mountain bike days and maybe
Hmm.
another 8 gravel days. So I'm like,
Yeah.
every time I have the opportunity, like today, I'm like, I just got to get up and go.
Yep.
Cause if not, I'm going to miss out on it. Right.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's so funny. I'm like, I wish I could appreciate it as much midsummer,
Right.
like an M&M midsummer should be as good as an M&M in October.
I think it's pretty true about everything, though. So, anyways, that was what I was thinking about this morning. Well, the other thing I was thinking about, me and my random notes. So I wrote a note. Christmas cactus. What do you think of that?
A Christmas cactus, did you say?
Yeah, that was my note for today. As I was thinking about our topic, we were talking about tapering and peaking. Thank you, Christy, by the way, for that question. I think it's a
Um,
week late for your event, by the way. I think you posted the question last week and your event was last week, but we'll talk about it because it's an important topic.
not
My
not really
Christmas,
not really sure what a Christmas cactus even is, honestly.
I'll show ya.
Oh, wow.
This is my Christmas
Beautiful.
cactus. It is, but it relates to our topic because it's supposed to bloom at Christmas.
Oh, happy
And I came
holidays.
home from vacation and it had buds all over it. And I was like, how did that happen? Last
Yeah.
year, my cat played with it, and so it didn't bloom because she broke all the buds off. So this year, I have this beautiful Christmas cactus 3 months early. What do you think that has to do with tapering and peaking?
Well,
Hmm.
it's obviously due to marketing because they start marketing Christmas way too early that the
Right,
Christmas cactus is like hearing commercials of Christmas stuff already. It's like, "Oh my
right.
god, it's time to bloom," because they don't really have a calendar.
Yeah,
Yeah, and mistimed, right? Like, it's
exactly.
hard
Mistiming.
because yeah, it's mistiming, but it's you have to take advantage of your fitness when it's there. You got to take
Right.
advantage of the temperature for budding or whatever it is when it's there. So is it really the cactus's fault or is it,
Your coach's
environmental
fault.
change or the fact that you left it for so long and didn't water it for a period of time or whatever it
Right.
was.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're exactly right. Like it has everything to do with,
it
peaking
does.
at the
So it's
right time.
clearly peaked, but we didn't taper correctly, right? Because it peaked at the wrong time. So what does that mean? What is a peak in our fitness, in our training?
For me personally, I
Yeah,
always define it to my athletes as it's the point of overreaching before you start going
to
into
crumble.
overtraining.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's the thing is peaking is hitting that point of like,
Hmm.
wow, I'm at basically my limit, my training limit of where I can build to and perform
Yeah.
at this point in time. If I keep pushing at this point in time, the wheels should really fall off the truck and I'll probably end up in overtraining.
Hmm. And that's not a fun place to be. That's a
No.
hole that and people use that term all the time. Like they have fatigue on a day and they'll say, oh, I'm overtraining. And it's like, well, you're probably under recovering. Overtraining, if we
Mhm.
really get into that metabolic state, is a place you don't want to be and you're not going to come out of it in a day. So,
Months.
yeah,
Months.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. So
Or longer,
peaking,
really.
I think of peaking as yes. So I'm at that highest point of fitness, and my FTP may go down, by the way, but other fitness is up,
Mhm.
and it's a fine. art between how much fatigue can I sustain without kind of going over the edge. And I don't think we always get it right, obviously. I mean, there've been
Nope.
right? You peak too early for your event and you're like, "Ah, I had great fitness 2 weeks ago. What happened?"
Or
Yeah.
you peak
So,
after your event, which is
I
more
know, which is
likely
even worse.
with newer athletes. I find personally that
Yeah.
they end up peaking post event
Yeah.
more often because, from a coach's perspective and even from the athlete's perspective, we don't like, it's all prediction. We don't know
Right.
how you're going to absorb the training or how long you need to taper. Some people need to
Mhm.
taper and then do a little bit more intensity before their race. Some people
Right.
need to taper all the way into their race. Like, there's different styles for different people of how we adapt. So a
Mhm.
lot of times what I'll find is like year one or year two, or at least event one, event two, if it's broken up throughout the year, for an athlete, the first couple times is just learning them,
Right.
learning how do you peak, how do you taper, how long do we need, what's too much, what's not enough, and then
Yeah.
usually by mesocycle or like peak three, we'll say, could be year two, could be year three, whatever it might be. That's when we're really starting to dial it in, of being
Mhm.
like, oh, this is how it goes for you.
Yeah. And I think when we look at numbers, for those of you familiar with training peaks, we've had lots of questions like, what does CTL mean and ATL? And when we're looking at peak, I think there's a couple of things that I like to look at. First of all, I want to see that ramp rate continuing up. If somebody's stagnant, they're not getting fitter. So that's my CTL increasing incrementally every week. But that TSB number, I have athletes who perform really well when they're in the like -20 range
Hmm.
because they're sharp, but they may have a little bit of fatigue, but they're able to perform. But I have other athletes who, if I don't get them up to like +10 or +15, they're just going to drag. They're not going to feel awesome. And that's very difficult because every single workout goes into that equation. And yeah, it's math. And
It
there's
is.
algorithms in there that I don't even understand because they're complex. But yeah,
Also, the
so there's
importance of testing, right? Testing is super important because not
yeah.
only does testing give us our numbers, testing shows us how well we perform at certain levels of fatigue as
Hmm.
well. If you notice your athlete is always testing very well in their FTP and they're in this -20 area, and
Yeah.
then you see them not testing very well when they're at a +5, right? Which would
Right.
normally be a good recovery. That lets you know, like, hey, this client actually might need to taper early
Right.
and then do like a little 1 week training block heading into the race, which I have an athlete who performs much better after
Yep.
doing a taper, a training week, and then racing.
Yeah. I
So
think
we
a
get our
lot of folks
fitness.
do, truthfully.
Yeah, I
I
would
think,
agree. I work pretty well right off of a taper.
yeah.
Um, Personally. But yeah, I think a lot of people adding a little bit of training back into the system because
Hmm.
think about it. After a rest day, we don't feel great the next day. We
No.
usually feel better 2 days later after we've done a little bit of a workout or openers or something.
Yeah.
So some
And
people
we
just
had a
need a week of
question
that.
about that last week. Somebody, I think it was Larry, actually, who I get to see today for a bike fit appointment. Hi, Larry. It'll be
Oh,
fun.
that's awesome.
Larry works in entertainment, and so did I for a long time. Although he's mostly on the music side, I was more on the theater side. But
Oh, we're still
um,
in entertainment, Lori. Look at us. We're like,
I know,
this is entertainment.
I
This
know this
is
is like I can't even think of a good Ren and Stimpy or
yeah, yeah, Beavis
Abbott
and
and
Butthead,
Costello or
stuff
yeah.
like that works. Yeah.
Um, anyway, so someone had asked, we had a cutback week recently, and why were we still working so hard? And it's like, okay, we're cutting back volume primarily, some intensity maybe, but we don't want to cut back everything. You aren't sharp anymore. So we
Hmm.
go too easy and we start to lose fitness and detrain and get stale. So it's a very fine art. I think it's if you find a coach who can taper you and peak you well, that's a really good skill to have for a coach. So that's our goal is we want to get you to a point where you're fit. So again, when we talk about adding all of these bonus things into our training programs, that may or may not help your fitness long term, even though it may make you feel good short term. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's hard. It's hard for people, and I understand that struggle of like, well, I can go harder. Well, I
Right.
can keep going. I can do more, and it's always been that idea of more is always better, right? And
Yeah.
more is only good if you can absorb it.
Right.
I can only fit so many M&Ms in my mouth. Like, more would be great, but I could only put so many in that I can actually chew and swallow. And that's the kind of thing with training is like, yeah, you can keep shoving it in,
Hmm.
but if you don't give the time for it to actually make the changes in your body and your body to absorb the training you've done, then
Right.
it's useless. So you might as well not have done it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard tapering and all that stuff. And, especially for something like this with the challenges, we're dealing with hundreds of people,
Who are all different.
all
Yeah.
different. And some people, and that's why you see some people have great gains with their FTP after a challenge and some don't, right?
Mhm.
Some might be every other challenge that they get these bigger gains because their physiology just allows them to absorb the training differently
Differently.
than how somebody else does. And some people lose fitness faster than other
Yeah.
people do. Yeah, there's no one size fits all on all this. And that's what
Right.
makes group training difficult. And a lot of coaches don't like doing training for that purpose, right? Is that it's it's a jack of all trades kind of thing, right? It's going
Mhm.
to help a lot of people, but it's not going to be the best for everybody. And we
Yeah.
want the best for everybody. That's the hard
Yeah.
part, right? Then that's why we
Yeah.
do this is because we're like, hey, let's make it as good as we can. And that's also why we're cycling through different challenges, the sprint challenge, the endurance
Mhm.
challenge, right? Like we're cycling through that to affect that whole year peak and changing of the
And reach
volume,
multiple
intensity.
people. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's like the experiential learning cycle. I dabbled for a little bit in a master's degree in instructional design, which 2 semesters that was dabbling. But anyways, one of the things we talked about was the experiential learning cycle, which I think is super important because there are people who learn by hearing, and there are people who learn by reading, and there are people who learn
Hmm.
by touching, and people who learn by doing. And I think fitness is the same way. We have to touch all of those things when we're working with a group. I remember when I wrote my first group program, and it was for a team. Um, Training for a charity event, and I struggled with it because I was used to writing individual programs, and I was like,
Yep.
how, but this isn't perfect. I had to let go of perfect. That's where you have to say, okay, when I do a group program, it can be good enough. It may not be perfect. Versus when I work one on
Yeah.
one with an athlete, I learn their rhythm, I learn their recovery, I learn everything about them, and part of that is science, right? I see the numbers, but also the art, listening,
The art.
reading, understanding
It's
how
art.
someone does. Yeah.
And
We're
I think
just
that's the hard
guessing. We're
part.
just BSing people. We don't know what we're talking about.
No, there is, and listen,
That's
there's a
what we
lot of
call art.
AI. There's a
There
lot of
is.
AI options out there for coaching and stuff like that. And honestly, AI can build you probably as good of a program, if not better, than an eight
Yeah.
week program that I can build for you. The major difference is 2 weeks into that program, I'm going to have a conversation with my
Mhm.
client and understand how they're absorbing what
Right.
we predicted is going to happen over the 8 weeks and then make those adjustments based on emotional and feel where that's where AI kind of loses. And that to me has always been the big difference between like, buying a program and say, all right, we're going to do this even us like this 8 week program
Mhm.
compared to having an individualized program. It could be the same exact program, but how
Right.
we adapt the program as we go. Training
Yeah.
is predicting. I'm predicting the future. This is how I think you're going to feel in week 7. Well, in week 1, I really have no idea,
I know.
right?
This is how we hope you're gonna feel. Yeah. I was listening to Consummate Athlete on the way home last night, Peter Glassford and Molly Herford, and he kept talking about penciling it into the training calendar. And
Mm,
to me, penciling something in means a lack of commitment, right? I'll pencil you in. I'm not gonna put it in pen. I'm gonna pencil you in. But then he made a really good point, and he was like, okay, your training plan is only as good as the first day. And then everything happens. Training happens or doesn't happen. Life
mhm.
happens or doesn't happen. Stress happens. Illness happens. All of these things. And so obviously it's dynamic and it's going to change. And it really made me change the way I think about the term penciling it in. I was like, yeah, we want to be fluid and dynamic. We want to be able to make changes based on what you've just done. Yeah. So, anyways, hi, Will. Hi, Maggie. I was looking, there aren't very many people here today. And I thought, maybe they all watched the debate last night and they're tired or something. But I thought, are we on the wrong channel? Did I do something wrong? Because every week I think I've done something wrong. But anyways, so yeah, back to tapering and peak. It is definitely we're all individuals. There's definitely science behind the numbers of how do we get you to the highest level of fitness without breaking you, basically, and then making sure you're fresh. And everybody's a little different with that. I know there's a big charity training event here on the West Coast called the California AIDS Ride. AIDS Life Cycle, and it's a 7-day ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and a lot of folks will take like 2 weeks off beforehand. And I'm like, I would feel crappy if I
Mm.
took 2 weeks. I raced one year on the Saturday the day before it started. I raced at the track, because that's the way I am. I'm used to riding frequently, and so I think also when we talk about how we design this taper and the peak, we need to do what you're used to doing. If you're used to riding every day probably is a good thing for you. If you're not, maybe not, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say
Anyways,
like for me, a lot of our taper for a lot of my clients is always about the frequency doesn't change, the intensity changes.
yeah.
So if you're normally training 5 days a week, we're probably going to still train 5 days a week. It's just we're not training as hard during those
Hmm.
5 days. And
Yeah.
then the length of taper also, this is very hard because if you just look at most of the books out there,
Hmm.
marathon training is probably the one that most people can relate with, especially with taper is, I had a client who's doing New York City and she just got
Yeah.
back to running and we're very short time to train for her, starting from zero essentially. She's like, oh, I'm going to run the last 10 miles of it with everybody like 2 weeks out from the event. And I was like, that's all fine and good, but you need to run much longer than 10
Yeah.
miles, right? Because that's her peak is going to be 2 weeks out from the race,
Yeah.
right? About 15 days out from the race. And I said to her, I go, now you also have to remember all these people are going to be asking you why you're doing this because
Yeah.
they've all done their longest run 4 weeks out from
Yeah.
the race and have started to drop. And, depending on the athlete, and those programs are all based on somebody who's running maybe 70 miles a week, right? So they're dropping it to 50 miles, to 40 miles, to 30 miles to race week. Well, if you're only running 30 miles a week at your peak, what am
Hmm.
I dropping that to?
Right.
20,
The
10,
couch.
5, and then like basically a
Yeah.
month has gone by and you haven't run long, right?
Yeah.
So different tapers for different people. And always, like I said to her, I was like, just be prepared that these people are going to second guess what you're doing.
Right.
I go, because they want to prove themselves right by proving you wrong. And just understand that there's more than one way to get to the finish line or start line for a lot of these
Yeah.
people. And this is the cards that we were dealt, why we're doing this, right? So, yeah, it's
And then
hard.
I'm
So,
going to tell
taper
them mind their own business. My coach told me to do this. So
for sure. Yeah. Or I
exactly.
said to them, or I said to her, I go, if they're making you feel bad, just be like, really? So your longest run's going to be a month out from the race? How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Right? Put that little doubt in their head. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to try to stab me. I'll stab you right back.
Yeah.
Harder.
So I'm racing a duathlon on Saturday, but I've run 3 or 4 times now. Um,
Perfect.
so my taper began last December, I guess. Yeah, it was good. I know. I'm just going because I can't not do it. It literally starts outside my front door, and it's the reason I started running. And I know. So
You'll
I
be
can
fine.
do the distance. There's just no speed there, which
You'll
it's
be
like,
fine. Again, it's
I know.
expectations. Understand what your
Exactly.
expectations are. I don't expect to win.
Ex-
Maybe I do, but I don't expect to win or
yeah.
expect to perform my best. But
Yeah.
you're fit and you can run. Like, roll with it.
Yeah. I'm
But
looking at Will's note. He's already planned out his entire year because he is riding AIDS Life Cycle. And yeah, they definitely, and Will, you'll notice the last group rides are usually 2 or 3 weeks out. So your mileage may vary literally and figuratively, but definitely I'm happy to chat with you about keeping your training up as you go. Because I think you've got this 9-month experience now, actually more than 9 months. So you should be in a good spot. So we can chat about that. Anyways, what do we have coming up this week? So, just a quick note on our confusing schedule in the live rides. So, this week we're riding with our Berlin. Dude, how fast was Matt?
crushed it. I got to say, like,
Crazy fast.
a 13-minute PR is what I think I
I
saw that
know.
he noted.
Yeah.
13 minutes is
Yeah.
I mean, that's 30 seconds a mile.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Elite
moving.
level racing
That's moving.
at 40.
240.
He just turned
240
40.
is
Yeah.
240 is moving.
It is. And it's so funny because when he interviewed me for this job and I was talking about how I had started running and I was, getting faster and PRing on the bike, and he looked at me like I was nuts. And I was like, but I'm faster. I'm faster than I was 10 years ago. And now I had to tell him, I was like, see, you're faster as a master. Um, hashtag. So yeah. It's good. Anyways, we're gonna ride with Matt on Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern, and then on demand, as we now know, will be at 12 p.m. And then we'll throw another ride in there at 3 p.m. all Eastern time. And then the following week, he's a little earlier because we're doing a 90-minute PZE ride. So that's going to be at 7, same on demand time. So noon and 3. So hashtag Team Wilpers Cycling. You can find your teammates on the leaderboard and give some high fives. You can never give too many high fives, by the way, in my opinion. I'm one of those nutsy, crazy people that high fives everybody during recoveries because I get bored. So I just go high five, high five, high five, high five your teammates. It's good. They won't think you're creepy, I promise. What else do we have going on? Last big week next week. So week 7, we're going to build, and then we're going to go into our mini taper, I guess, for the final week, and we'll do another FTP test at the end or an event, depending on what you've got on your calendar. My thoughts are with the people of North Carolina right now and South Carolina. Greenville obviously is hit really hard. The status of Hincapie is up in the air at this moment. So hopefully so many lives have been lost and properties lost. It was pretty devastating. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's about it. Do a little more hill climbing this week and keep that fitness up. So what do you have on
Yeah.
tap, Brian?
Yeah, we also had the Mountain to Coast, which is also the ride
Oh,
across North
yeah.
Carolina that starts this weekend, actually. So we had maybe like 200 people doing our program for that. They're
Hmm.
still doing it. They're just starting on Monday. They're skipping one of the stages that was affected too bad
Back in the
with the
mountains.
flooding.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're still doing a 6-day ride instead of a 7-day ride, starting it on Monday. So obviously, all well wishes to everybody
Yeah.
in that area for sure. Vermont knows all too well how bad
Right.
these mountain floodings can be. We still have roads out from floodings 3 months ago.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, this week we kind of continue on. Yesterday was our VO2 max day, which will continue again the following Tuesday. And these VO2 max, they're not all out crazy VO2 max workouts that we had during the sprint. We're really doing these VO2 max workouts, VO2 max efforts, kind of just to maintain what we gained during
Hmm.
that sprint challenge. And we're not trying to really improve this necessarily, although since the rest week, these kind of VO2 max efforts have been mixed in with tempo efforts to where like we're doing kind of a tempo effort and then we spike up to maybe 30 or 40 seconds at like a VO2 max kind of standing climb and then back down into tempo. Something that you would kind of run into out on the road, right? Like
Hmm.
these little hard efforts or passing somebody or sprinting for a state line or something like that. This week, 2x20 on Thursday. So, basically our sweet
Everybody's
spot
favorite.
obviously mixed up. I know. But there's a lot of play in there. Like I do try to
Yeah.
mix it up. Like something for me is like I personally sometimes I don't mind just being at 88% for 20 minutes. But I like again outside, we're never kind of in that stagnant kind of
Right.
area. So even indoors, I like train a little bit of variety in there. Let's be at 80%, 90%, 95%, 85%, 100%, 80%. Like
Or
and kind of
change
bounce
cadence
around
up.
and change cadences as
Yeah.
well.
Doing over
So
unders with
that's
cadence is a great way to hold that
yep.
and become very flexible.
All that's in there for this week, extending our long rides. Again, this is our longest. No, next week will be our longest outdoor ride, but we're up to
Hmm.
pretty good distance for most people. And the
Yeah.
next week's going to build off the same. It's really the same structure as far as Tuesday and Thursday are concerned. The 2x20 the following week is, I think, a little bit more challenging to where again we're kind of throwing actually a little kind of VO2 mix in there, just a little burst in there, and then kind of settling back down into that. And you know, I love doing those because it kind of just reminds us that we can.
Right.
A lot of times when we just do VO2 max workouts, what happens? We do VO2 and then we go to zero,
Right.
right? We kind of rest. And when we're outside or in these events, we don't have that, or group ride, we don't have that ability. Sometimes we go hard and then we got to settle
Hmm.
right back down into that tempo or threshold area and kind of just hang out there for a bit. And you will recover there if
Yeah.
you're below that FTP. It just takes longer. You
Hmm.
just so by practicing it indoors, it's not well, you do get better at it, but it's more about getting used to what it feels like and
Yeah.
knowing that it's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are my kind of favorite weeks. These ones, kind
Yeah.
of like a good VO2 max and then like a good kind of tempo day.
I like to mix it up. I like intensity, I have to say. I I do miss the long rides, and that was the one sad thing. I went out with a girlfriend on Saturday, Sunday. We were gonna do this kind of epic mix of gravel and road, and I didn't have it. I got about 2 hours in, and I was like, I was feeling the runs, I was feeling the strength, not those runs, I was feeling the runs, and, I was like, "I don't think I can do the rest of the loop." It got harder and harder, and I was like, "Okay, that's why we do this at this time of year." So, it's okay, but yeah.
Yeah, I love intensities too. I like short intensity.
Yeah.
I do
Well,
struggle
that's what
with
I've
that.
been doing a lot.
That's my style. Like
Yeah,
short and hard. Once I start getting over like 3 minutes, I'm just like, 4 minutes and 5 minutes. And
yeah,
honestly, that's what I got to work on the most. And this past year wasn't a great training year for me. So like
yeah.
going into the winter this year, mentally, I'm in a better spot to kind of understand what I need to do living up here in
Mhm,
Vermont. Like the riding in Vermont and the riding in New York is so different. And I was thinking about that today on my ride of like, why was this not a great training year for me? And you know what it boiled down to is like this was my first winter through Vermont, right? And kind of
mhm,
learning that structure is definitely different, but it goes to show it really went to show to me how important my community is.
mhm,
And this was the first year in 5 years that I didn't have my racing team,
mm.
that
And
I
I
was
was thinking
training with
about that too.
on a regular basis. Like we'd be every, Tuesday, Thursdays and weekend long rides where like, I had to show up fit and not only for myself to be able to hang, but also, on a racing team, you play a role.
Yeah,
And on race day, I have to be able to fulfill that role for my teammates. So it holds you accountable for really kind of putting the time and effort in. And this was really the first year I didn't have that to
yeah.
push me.
It's
So
hard.
it's hard. It is. Like I gotta view that now as like, all right, well, what is it that I'm training for and how
Mhm,
do I hold myself accountable for it? You know? So
yeah.
yeah, it was interesting. I didn't think I'd be affected that much by it, but I really am.
I
Goes to
am.
show how
I
important
was
this community
actually
is.
thinking about that, and I was like, "Oh, Brian's found his people," but I guess you haven't, because 'cause I'm in the same boat. I had a bike fit client in my studio yesterday who I'd fit in 2020 or 2021 before I moved over to the coast, and, she also lives on the coast down in Monterey, and it was like, "Okay, I haven't found my people yet." There's, the cycling club that's really, really old, and now they're all starting to ride e-bikes, so they're too fast for me now. And there's the young kids who I relate more to the young kids, but I'm not fit enough and young enough to ride with the young kids. And finding my people has been hard here. And
Yeah,
you take it for granted, especially when you live in a larger place like New York, or me being over in San Jose, where there's just tons of cycling clubs. You can find a club for whatever you need, basically. And I don't have that over here. I have these two distinct audiences, and a lot of mountain biking, which group rides are a different thing in mountain biking, but yeah, so I'm
much,
still
much
trying to
different.
I was trying to build it. I started a women's gravel ride last summer, and I just didn't get the numbers that I thought I would get. And so this summer I was like, I'm just going to do my own thing, but I have to make
Yeah,
my people. I have to do it.
we have a lot of good fast group rides here, like a
Yeah.
Tuesday road ride. We have a Thursday gravel ride. We have a Saturday gravel ride, like stuff like that. That's there. Um, but what's hard is, yeah, I was getting dropped all summer and those things, and that's obviously hard. But it's either like A group or like C group. you
Hmm.
know, I'm like A minus, B plus. So
Yeah.
it's like C group way too easy. A group you're going to get dropped at some point in time. But really, it's in my head like through the winter is making sure I remember like, hey, if you don't want to get dropped,
You need to be doing
where's your
these
weakness?
things.
And this gets that
Yeah.
specificity that we were gonna get into, which we'll talk about next week. Is what's the difference between Vermont and New York and that kind of riding?
Hmm.
Well, in New York, I could be zone two, zone three with some short 1, 2, 30-second hard effort sprints, short little climbs, right? No problem. Here, those climbs are 5 to 20 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And where I really struggle is those shorter 8%, 9%, 16%, where it's like VO2 max effort for like 5 minutes,
Hmm.
right? Like I'm just like I'm out the back door. Like you better open the screen door because
Yeah.
I'm about to bust through the back, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like it's on. So it's like I know what my weakness is. I know
Hmm.
as a cyclist how I need to change to perform better up here in those groups, and I just got to put the work in. Unfortunately,
Yeah. And it's a good practice to go through a year-end review as you finish your season, whether it's just yourself or yourself with your coach, and figure out what worked and didn't work and make some notes while it's still kind of fresh. And I can always look at the numbers, but I can't always sense the feelings. And make those notes, and maybe that's what we need to work at. I mean, that is one of the things that my coach and I were like, I need to do the longer VO2 efforts. I, for whatever reason, failed at them almost every time I did them. And I think it's mental. I could do harder things, but I just struggled with like the 3 and the 4 minute intervals. And she's like, "You're going to nail it this year. You need to nail that." I'm like, "Okay, that's one of my goals." I got to work on my VO2. So yeah,
Yeah, it's just the
I
work, and that's all
imagine
it is.
you and I will
The
get
work and
to
time.
ride a little bit on Zwift together probably this winter. So that's a good thing. Yeah,
Yeah, doing long, hard intervals.
I know exactly. Anyways, we're gonna wrap for the week, I think. Yay! Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Maggie, for your compliments. We work hard on these programs, and hopefully they make sense for everybody in a group setting. And we do our best to give everybody a little more fitness and some good goals, and yeah, have a little fun while we're doing it. So, yeah, let's talk about specificity next week. I know we keep going over a question by Eric, who's been racing cyclocross this year and learning lots of lessons. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about cyclocross, which is just a rad genre of the sport. And yeah, see, we'll talk a little more
Yeah,
about
awesome,
specificity.
awesome
Yeah,
sport. Just the bad timing. I just hate the
yeah,
fact that it's like this time of the year when I just
I
want to
know.
like chill.
I
Like,
know. So it's it used to be an off-season sport for both road and mountain, and I think nowadays it's its own sport. You have people who
it's its own sport.
specialize, and it has to be because it starts in August and goes through January, and then you can't race a full season, maybe half a season. But yeah,
Yeah.
anyways, thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.